maybe you can provide a counterpoint. I would love for you to provide a counterpoint, but even more broadly, more theoretically, the founders of this country were also not libertarians. They had a very sense that the state served a purpose, that the state was supposed to advance the common good, that it was supposed to protect the rights and secure the rights of citizens, and then contribute to the happiness, the overall happiness of the society. And so I think that...
Let me respond to that, actually, Chris.
Yeah.
Actually, so I respectfully disagree with the contention about the founders not being libertarian. I think the founders were a motley crew, actually, right? They had vigorous debates as illuminated in the Constitutional Convention and even in competing views of the Federalist Papers. But I think an area where I think there's a bridge of common ground that I think you and I have. I mean, I think we have a backdrop of deep common ground, but even on this micro debate, some level of common ground is a difference between and analyzing this issue at the level of the states versus the federal government. I don't think it's the same analysis. And I think our founding fathers actually were, if we were to broadly aggregate them, they had diverse views. But at the federal level, I think they mostly were, by what today's standards we would call staunch libertarian, even while recognizing the role for states, and diverse in their approaches, had the ability for a state government and even local governments that sit beneath this state to foster a vision of the good, an affirmative vision of the good that they did not want the federal government adjudicating, but they set up in a system of federalism that delegated through the codification in the 10th Amendment and the vision enshrined in the Bill of Rights, including and up to the 10th Amendment, saying that that which is not reserved expressly to the federal government is reserved respectively to the states and to the people, which is really just a small set of functions that were otherwise reserved to the federal government. And I think that that's responsive to, I think, your point about states. You could pick your favorite state examples, Florida, South Dakota. You go straight down the list of what you would think of as models of different versions of conservative governance. That is exactly what our founders, certainly of them, may have envisioned happening at the level of the state versus at the level of the federal government. I think part of what we've been missing is just fortitude. I mean, you got a guy like Nixon that talked a big game about taking on the nanny state, but he actually passed into law the EPA. He actually put into law, he expanded a lot of the federal bureaucracy underneath him. And I think domestically, part of the issue with a guy like Nixon, and I bring this up because you brought him up, but also because it's evidence of what we've seen since Nixon, is he wasn't actually an ideologue. He was a pragmatist, really, actually. And I think that's what made him strong on foreign policy, is that he was a pragmatist on foreign policy rather than an ideologue. He was able to effectively get Mao out of the clasp of the Soviet Union to do what was previously thought to be impossible, which is to drive an even broader wedge in the Sino-Soviet alliance, which led us to the near end of the Cold War, which is a brilliant maneuver. But he viewed himself as that type of pragmatist, not being particularly ideological enough with respect to things like demolishing the administrative state or dismantling the federal bureaucracy. We said, in certain cases, maybe we need to use it. I'm going to be a pragmatist here. And I think that we actually need more of that ideology sharpened with respect to even domestic policy. I'm a big fan of being a pragmatist on foreign policy. But on domestic policy, I don't think we've had somebody who's been quite as ideological on the matter of the federal government in the same way that Javier Milei has. And I don't think that undermines the case you're making, which is mostly drawing from examples at the state level, which is exactly what our founders may have envisioned in that they were libertarian when it came to the federal government, but not necessarily libertarian, but much more virtue-oriented, Aristotelian in their conception of what a state or local government was supposed to be.